It is the Martha Zoller Show, and lots going on under the Gold Dome. And joining me right now is Representative Chuck Efstration from Gwinnett County. And we're going to talk a little bit about Mulberry City, but also a few other things that are happening under the Gold Dome. Chuck, welcome back to the program. It's great to talk to you.
Good morning, Martha. Great to be with you.
So how's it going overall? Because, we're not quite halfway there. And it's going to start picking up. You know how all that goes. But what's your sense of this session compared to other ones?
It's been a very productive legislative session so far. Today is day 21 of 40 days. We've advanced very important measures in the area of education, public safety, tax cuts for Georgians. And so I think that this is going to be remembered as a very productive year where a lot of great things were done to help Georgians across our state.
So tell us a little bit about the Mulberry City initiative. I know it's been signed already by the governor, but tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. The governor signed the bill this week. What this legislation would do is in the area of the state that I represent, northern eastern Gwinnett, it would create a new city that would allow local control of planning and zoning issues without imposing a city property tax. This was requested by the constituents that I serve, and it's very popular locally. And I think that the city is going to be a great success if voters approve it on the ballot in May of this year.
And so that's the main thing is the ballot approval. I mean, what you guys passed and what the governor signed was just to let the people decide.
That's exactly right. Part of the proposal, as I originally made it, was that voters would have to approve this. We want to make sure that there's local support and buy-in for it, but this is not a standard city structure here. What we're talking about is very limited services, the fewest that are required by state law, so that local control of planning and zoning can really be the focus. Constituents are concerned about high-density growth right now, and Gwinnett has 4 commission districts, each serving 250,000 residents. This would allow for a much smaller governing authority, city council members representing approximately 7,000 to 9,000 residents. Rather than giving your complaint to a county commissioner, you could talk to your neighbor or somebody in the community who's representing you on this council to discuss growth.
Well, it sounds exciting, and I know that there's always challenges when you make these kinds of changes. But overall, when you think about the cities that have been created, in most cases, have actually been closer to the people. They've been better for the people that have had them, and they've been successful in being able to accomplish the things they've set out to do. And this high density thing is something that I think we're dealing with all throughout Georgia. I mean, the affordable housing situation continues to be an issue. But what I'm hearing when I'm a Rotarian, so I travel around to different Rotary clubs in my role with a program called GRSP, which is a student scholarship program. And so I get a chance to sit down in different communities in Rotary clubs and hear what they're talking about, as well as make my presentation. And I cannot tell you how many times that issue of high density housing comes up. Maybe you have a real estate guest or you have someone, and especially in communities where they're concerned there's going to be too much of short-term rental included in that. So there's a lot of issues related to housing, isn't there?
This is a very important issue to the constituents I serve, and it's also a nonpartisan issue. I have heard from experts that the Metro Atlanta area is actually overbuilt for apartments right now. So there are unique challenges for different parts of the state, but I think the concern is that voters feel like they don't have an ear on the governing authority right now with the county commission, and so having that local control to really hear out their concerns. When you already have an area that's overcrowded, there's bad traffic congestion, issue with the schools being able to have the capacity necessary for students, then those voices need to be heard. We should not be approving high density in circumstances where the infrastructure simply cannot support it.
Absolutely. And in your part of Gwinnett County and this part of Hall County, in the areas in North Georgia, we've been dealing with immigration issues for a very long time. For as long as I've been doing this show, immigration issues have been something we talk about. But I think you would agree, and based on what the House has been talking about this week, it is something that you guys are talking about too, this dramatic increase in crossings across our southern border as well as our northern border is having impact in Georgia and around this country.
Well, the Biden administration has had zero leadership on this issue, and we now have a true disaster situation with the border effectively being open right now. The House took strong steps this week to support Governor Kemp and stood with Governor Kemp at a press conference announcing additional members of the Georgia National Guard would be going to the border to support efforts in the state of Texas. I think that Republican governors are really speaking out here. The president needs no additional legislative authorization to seal the border, and we need strong leadership in the executive branch in Washington right now to do something about this crisis.
Well, I know you have Democrat friends. I have Democrat friends. We live in a world where we interact with folks, and you can tell when they get their talking points, because the talking points right now are there has to be new legislation and that the president needs more authority. And how I answer them is that both President Obama and President Trump controlled the border with the exact same laws that President Biden has. Okay? So even though you may not like how President Obama did it, he would convene a committee at DHS when it was 1,000 people a day. That's when they would trigger things. And even though he didn't talk about it much, he was known as the deporter in chief. This administration has got 1.5 million people that have been adjudicated to be deported. So they've been through the entire process and they're supposed to be deported. And the administration will not do it. I'm sure those folks some of them are in Georgia if you've got 1.5 million. So you're absolutely right. And if, when I talk to my Democrat friends, I say, okay, so how do you explain that President Obama and President Trump did a better job than President Biden is doing with the exact same laws?
That's very well said. The president has legislative statutory authorization right now to seal the border, right now to deport those who need to be deported. Additional legislation is not necessary. And I think the Democrats need to be reminded of that, and we have to continue to respond that attempting to cast this as an issue that needs to be decided before Congress is just not accurate. The president has the ability to address this issue now, today, and we need leadership from the president to address this problem.
And, to me, the border is it's a part of immigration, but it's almost a separate issue because a secure border is a national security issue in addition to being a part of your immigration policy. Certainly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on legal immigration. I know you've met with these folks because I've met with them where there are groups of people that are under H-1B visas and they're waiting for green cards, and there is this backlog. And these are people that have come here legally. They're following the rules. There's this huge backlog. They're in limbo because they can't get a green card, or it's a huge wait for it. And these are the folks we should be helping instead of making it more difficult because we're letting 15,000 people a day come across the border illegally.
It's almost as if those who are following the law and doing things right are being penalized. They're being cut in line by folks who are not following the law and have no regard for lawful entry, lawful immigration to the United States. I think that many immigrant groups are some of the strongest individuals speaking out in opposition to the lack of leadership, the issue with the lack of leadership at the border right now. They're saying that we followed the process and we need the federal government to step up here and make sure that we have a secure border so that everyone follows the legal immigration process that we have in place. And so I think that that's an important issue that's going to be discussed in the campaign because we, as I said, have a crisis at the border right now, and we need new leadership in Washington.
So what are your key priorities that you have left in this legislative session?
The tax cuts that were passed recently in the Georgia House are very exciting. We've passed legislation to save Georgia taxpayers over $5 billion over the past few years. We have an additional proposal to accelerate the state income tax cut. Taxpayers' money is theirs. It's not the government, and it needs to stay in their wallets. And so I'm very excited about this effort. We have prioritized education with an additional pay raise for Georgia teachers. Georgia now has some of the highest salaries for teachers in the Southeast, and I'm very proud of the $10,000 pay increase that teachers have had over the past few years. Law enforcement and public safety continues to be a high priority. Georgians deserve to feel safe, particularly when they're in their homes, their businesses. There is no excuse for lawlessness, and we have backed that up with additional pay raises for frontline law enforcement in our state. There's an effort to increase the size of the state patrol to ensure that law enforcement has the tools necessary to continue to enforce the law, particularly when places like Atlanta rely on the state patrol for law enforcement. We have to make sure that the tools are there so that we can continue to keep law and order. I'm a former felony prosecutor. I understand the importance of that and how it's so fundamental to all of our society and ensuring that we maintain law and order in our state.
Well, Chuck Efstration, thank you so much for being with us today. I look forward to having you come into the studio sometime. We'd love to have you up here because if you haven't been to Gainesville lately, you haven't been to Gainesville. We are growing like crazy.
I was there yesterday, and I look forward to coming into the studio sometime soon.
That'd be great. Thank you so much for being with us today.